It's on? All right. Very quickly, just a very quick review of last week. We went into a lot of detail on many of these verses, but we looked last week at the scriptures that were the word wine or something similar is used. And the first question that come up and the first miracle of Jesus is, did Jesus really turn the water into wine, or was it some kind of early grape juice? And I say early because we'll deal with that later. We looked at the Greek word itself in some detail, and I got a text message from someone that was watching, and they gave me the Hebrew word, which is also the Hebrew same word for the Greek word. Both of them are very definitely, no question, both words refer to wine as we think of it. We looked at a lot of scripture. The evidence is clear, especially in the Old Testament, that when it uses the Hebrew word, and I don't speak Hebrew, so I don't try to show my ignorance, but the Hebrew word in almost every case refers to wine. We looked in, and I just listed a couple of verses in Leviticus 10. The high priest was not allowed to drink wine when he went into the Holy of Holies, but he could drink wine when he came out of the Holy of Holies. We saw a Nazirite was not allowed to drink wine the whole time that he was under a Nazirite vow. And there's one scripture I left off, and rats, because that was one I really emphasized last week. It's probably in Leviticus, but I didn't transfer it this time, where it talked about the high priest could not drink wine, could not drink strong drink, could not eat grapes. So he would not have even been allowed to eat grape juice. He could not eat grapes, dried or moist, as long as he was fulfilling the work of the high priest. In Luke, John the Baptist was not allowed to drink wine because of his unique calling. In fact, he was a Nazirite from his birth. So from his birth on, he was not allowed to drink any form of wine. In Luke 7, John the Baptist ate locusts and wild honey, and he dressed funny. And every time I think about dressing funny, I remember the lady that sits on the front seat 33 years ago. And I don't think y'all were here yet. But I had a sport coat that in college was really in style. I mean, it is plaid. It's got all kinds of colors and shapes, and it was wild. In college, that was perfectly acceptable. So when we came here, I wore it one Sunday, and I couldn't hardly get that lady on the front seat to stop laughing long enough to preach. So I've never worn it since then. But John the Baptist dressed funny. He wore a leathern girdle, and he didn't dress like most people, and he didn't eat like most people. So because he ate locusts and wild honey, they said he had a devil, and because he dressed funny, they said that guy is demon possessed. Just because he didn't drink nor eat normal food. Jesus came along eating and drinking, and they called him a glutton. Everybody know what a glutton is? Yeah, it's what my doctor put a stop to last week. I have to lose weight. It's not an option. I have to get my A1C, if you know what that is. You know what A1C is? Does anybody know? I know you know. Do you know what A1C is? If you've ever had blood work, it tells you how close you're getting to becoming a diabetic. I'm not there yet, but I'm closer than the doctor wants. So now I'm on a straight cardboard diet. It's about all I can drink. But Jesus came eating and drinking. And because he was eating, they called him a glutton. And because he was drinking, they called him a grape juice bibber. No, they called him a wine bibber because he drunk wine. And to me, that is so obvious. We'll get into some more questions. We ended up last week, Jesus turned 95 to 135 gallons of water into wine. How do we know it was wine? Why couldn't it have been grape juice? Well, I'll give you that in a little bit. But the ruler of the feast, the head honcho at the feast, drunk it and called it good wine. And he said it's customary to serve the good wine first. You can still taste it. I am not a connoisseur. I don't know if I could tell you the difference between wine made in Florida or wine made in Alaska. I know a real connoisseur can tell you where it was made, everything. I'm not that good, but it was called good wine. They served the good wine, and then when people, and I took the quote there, well drunk, then they served the cheap stuff because nobody could taste the difference anyway by that point. The wine that Jesus made was by far the best the ruler had ever tasted. So he could still taste it. He was not well drunk so much that he could not taste the difference yet. But then that raises some questions. What was Jesus doing at a wedding where people were going to get drunk? Did you ever think about that? Why was he at a wedding? Now, years ago, I sold life insurance, and I won a trip, all expense trip paid to, are you ready for this? For an outstanding service, I got an all expense trip paid to Bowling Green, Kentucky. Woo! Wow. Well, there was a bunch of other guys. They drove, so I had to go where they went. They decided one night to stop off at a bar. I threw a fit, threatened them with everything I could threaten them with. But they stopped at the bar, and I let it be known that I was not done with that. The boss was going to hear about that and everything else. I made sure that I did not go anywhere around them. I didn't go in. I didn't sit with them. I certainly didn't drink with them. I wanted nothing to do with them because I didn't know they had a designated driver. I didn't know that. But I'd already called my wife to come get me. I said, I'm not riding home with a bunch of drunks. So I had called her to come get me. In that case, I was there because we all won a trip together. But what was Jesus doing there? Now, if you had our picnic coming up in a few months, and you announced publicly there'll be free beer, wine, whiskey, bourbon, free for everybody for the taking. I'm just saying, if you did, I can tell you who would not be at our church picnic. I would not be there. So what was Jesus doing when the purpose was when they are well drunk, and that literally means well drunk, then you serve the cheap stuff because they can't tell the difference anyway. What was he doing there? And why would he make anywhere from 95 to 135? And I'm being conservative, that's using 7.5 gallons per pot or 9 gallons per pot. Casey found some place that used 10 gallons per pot, or was that my wife? One of them found 10 gallons, one of them found 20 gallons. I stayed on the conservative side. Why would he make wine in such abundance when he knew how easily it could be abused? And that's a question that I've asked. Do what? I'm sorry, I can't.
For the same reason he put the tree in the garden.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that answer, but I like that one better than mine. Is it okay to eat steak? Do you like steak? I don't. I'm fixing to, but because that's one of the few things I can eat. Is it wrong to go to Golden Corral and eat a big hearty meal for everybody except you? I'm telling you, if you really want to ever fill him up, take him to Golden Corral, or where did I take you one time? Was that Cece's? I think it was Cece's, because I counted, he ate like 20 or 30 slices of pizza, and I was full watching him. But is it okay to take an aspirin occasionally? Do you ever? I can't take aspirin, but I take Tylenol. So, is it okay to take Tylenol? It better be, because I've taken quite a few since Monday. I take 2 500 milligrams at a time. Will 2 500 milligrams, more than likely, will that hurt me? Probably not. If I took 3 500 milligrams, would it really hurt me? Probably not. If I took 100 500 milligrams, you think that might hurt me? Yeah, I think it probably would. I like to eat too much. For breakfast this morning, I had 2 pieces of toast. Would I be called a glutton? No, I ate in moderation. It's low-carb toast, which means 0 taste. 1 carb, but 0 taste. If I ate baked potato, would I be a glutton? What would make me go from eating a regular meal to becoming a glutton? What would change that? Excessive amounts. Just like with the Tylenol. I took 2 quite a bit Monday, took 2 several yesterday. When I can't remember which surgery it was, but they gave me Percocet, and it's on my chart now. Never, never, never give me Percocet again. But it eased the pain. Boy, it eased the pain. But if I took 10, 15, 20 Percocets a day, what would happen to me? I became addicted within 2 days. I was addicted, and they said it's not possible till I started going through withdrawal. And it was exactly like I had seen withdrawal at the police department. So I went through withdrawal after 2 days. But eating a baked potato doesn't make me a glutton. If I ate 50, I probably would, but it's the excess. So You know, and I like that illustration of the tree. I'm going to remember that one. You're dying to say something.
We started to discuss this a little bit last week, and I brought up a portion of scripture that talks about how there's no thing, no thing is inherently bad. Where the evil comes from is from the heart of men. And you said that you couldn't think of the scripture that I was referring to, and I couldn't either.
Well, I found one very close. Go ahead.
Is it in Mark?
No.
In Mark chapter 7, verses 14 through 23. I won't read them all, but for instance, in verse 15.
Wait a minute.
Jesus
Mark
says-
7.
Mark 7. I can pick out one verse in particular, but 7:15 says, "There is nothing from without a man that enters into him to defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are they that defile the man."
And that's
So
what comes from the
nothing
heart.
that you take in that is wrong. It's what comes out of you. It's what's in your heart. It's what's in your spirit. It's what's in your desires that makes that thing evil. There's nothing wrong with wine in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with medicine in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with food. And in fact, if you want to take it to those extremes, you can look at scripture and you can find places where it says that sleep is bad. If you sleep too much, it's a bad thing for you. So we don't
Yeah.
oversleep.
In Proverbs especially. The sluggard.
What you desire, it's about the desires of your heart. That's what makes it evil.
Yeah, the verse I found is in Ephesians. Be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit.
Right, and that deals specifically with wine. But this verse and this group of verses here, Jesus speaking specifically says, nothing from without defiles you. Nothing from without is what's evil. What's evil is what comes out of your heart. What's evil is what comes out of your desire.
Yeah, that clock still says it's 20 to 1.
Yeah, it's waiting on another signal from the atomic clock.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to put my watch here. Jesus was what? And that was one of the first questions I asked many years ago. Why would Jesus turn water to wine when he knew it was capable of being used in excess? Those of us who are married, God made the act of marriage for marriage. But if you take it excess, it becomes sin because it's outside of God's perimeters and outside of the limits that God gave. Even by my watch, I'm going to have to hurry. In Acts chapter 2, and I remember first church I pastored, we had a man that adamantly disagreed with me on this subject. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it until later when he came up and said, just want you to know I disagreed with you. And it's like, oh, okay. In Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, they're all speaking in tongues, different languages. And the people said, oh, these men are drunk. They're drunk, and they're speaking out of their head. Now, I want you to look at the argument Peter used to show that he was not drunk. In verse 13, Peter and the apostles were accused of being drunk. Peter's explanation was, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, what kind of argument would that be? If you accused me of being drunk, I'm not going to argue. I'm not drunk. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Am I making sense? Am I making any sense at all? Basically, what Peter was saying, it was the third hour of the morning. Their morning started at 6, not 12. Their morning started at 6. The third hour would be 9 o'clock. It's like, we haven't had time to get drunk. It's only 9 o'clock. We haven't had time. That's not the argument that I would use. When every time I go to the hospital, do you smoke? No. Do you do this? No. Do you do this? No. Do you drink? Sure, water, milk, coffee, But I would, it's like, no, We went to a restaurant here a while back with some friends, and they came over and brought us the wine menu, and I said, we don't need it, we don't drink, we don't need your wine list. I didn't say, oh, I don't need your wine list because it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. You know, it doesn't make any sense. In 1 Corinthians, Paul, in taking the Lord's Supper, for in eating, every one taketh before other his own supper. One is hungry. Now, they're taking the Lord's Supper. One is hungry. Let's face it, that little bitty piece of bread that you get is not going to fill you up. One is hungry, and another is drunken. Why? If you read that whole chapter, they were abusing the Lord's Supper. They were not using it, they were abusing it. And then there's that verse in Ephesians 5:18, be not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but instead be filled with the Spirit. You can't get much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Can't think of the word. You can't get much plainer than that. Being drunk means you've gone in excess. The qualifications of a pastor is he's not given to wine. Some folks read it, not given wine. He's not given to wine. He's not, I like the word addicted. It doesn't control him. No striker. It's funny because when you get down to the, what is it, the pastor's wife or the deacon's wife, one, not given to much wine. You know, how much is much? But he's not to be given, meaning he's not to be controlled by it. He's not to be under its control. Let's face it, when you get drunk, you're out of control. I remember when I was with the police, they decided they wanted us to get an idea of what it was like to drive drunk. Now, I don't know who came up with this. Has your brother ever done anything like this? They had a special pair of goggles made that gave the same effect of a drunk person who is driving. So, you know, I put it on. They gave you this little four-wheel golf cart, and you had to drive through this obstacle course looking, seeing as if you were drunk. The same principle. I can't believe your brothers never let you do that. Ask him about it sometime. But, you know, just like, oh, I can handle this. I think I ran over every cone they put up anywhere around because I wasn't seeing. I was under the influence of those goggles which twisted your view just as if I had been drunk. So he's not controlled by wine. And then drink no longer water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake and thine oft infirmities. Well, that means grape juice. I'll tell you why that's impossible in a minute. It is a fact. My father-in-law had a stomach condition, or was it stomach? I think it was stomach condition many 30, 40 years ago. And the doctor told him drink a little glass of wine every night, and it helped clear up his stomach condition. It's a great medicine. When the Good Samaritan, you know, they would often pour wine and oil. Wine would purify it, kill the germs, and the oil would help to heal it. So he said, you know, don't drink water. It's not been purified. It's not been sanitized. It's not been treated. In fact, the water will probably make you sicker than than the other thing. In Peter, the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. When we walked in lasciviousness, Peter, we walked in lasciviousness, we walked in lust, and we walked in excess of wine. The emphasis is we walked in excess, revelings, banqueting, and so forth. Now, argument I hear frequently, I don't hear it as much now because I'm not around that many people, but I heard it a lot years ago. I was in Indiana, and a person came up and said, I just found a way to refute everything you said. It's like, okay. They said, there's this store down here, and they've got prominently advertised non-alcoholic wine. And I thought, doesn't sound right. So I went to the store, looked all over the store, found what they were talking about, and it said in big letters, non-alcoholic wine. But underneath in real small letters, it had grape juice. I went back and I said, you need to learn how to read the small print. The temperance movement back in the 1800s was primarily aimed at destroying any and all liquor, any and all alcohol. They wanted total abstinence. And so in the 1820s and 1830s, there were laws passed all over the country banning any form of alcohol, any form. Whiskey, bourbon, I don't even know all the different kinds, but whatever they were banning it because it was destroying homes. Husbands were coming home drunk, beating up their wife and their kids. Husbands were taking their paychecks, spending every bit of it on alcohol. And so churches and religious organizations got behind this idea, let's just outlaw alcohol. And they did it for several years. And then finally it actually made it to a constitutional amendment. And then years down the road, they found out that husbands were still getting alcohol somewhere. They were still coming home drunk, beating up their wife and kids. They were still spending their money. And so the constitutional amendment was voted out. It was voted in, then it was voted out. During this time, and I had a good friend of mine one time, I told him this, and he argued, that is not true. That is not true. That is not true. I said, go home, because their church was like 150, 200 years old. And I said, before the temperance movement, your church used wine in the Lord's Supper. We did not. We've never used wine. I said, go home, look up your church minutes. He did. Guess what? Prior to the temperance movement, his church, along with 100% of other churches in the country, used wine in the Lord's Supper. Well, where did Welch's grape juice come from? And this is history. You can Google it, look it up online, and it'll go much more in depth. Thomas Welch, who is considered the inventor or the discoverer of how to make grape juice. He was a Methodist preacher. He was also a dentist, although I never figured out how that really helped him much. He felt that churches were being hypocritical. You preach against drunkenness. You preach against getting drunk, beating up your wife, and then you serve wine in the Lord's Supper, you're just a bunch of hypocrites. And so there was no other option. That was it. It was wine or nothing. So Thomas Welch decided, and it took him several years, he found a way. In fact, he's considered one of the first ones to ever use pasteurization. Now pasteurization, if you buy milk that isn't pasteurized, you got a good chance of getting sick. He is one of the first ones who invented pasteurization to kill the, I just drew a blank. The leaven in grape juice. And so then he said, it comes from the same vine. It's the same thing, but without the stigma of being a hypocrite. And so many churches began switching from wine to grape juice because of a Methodist preacher who said the Bible, and he admitted the Bible clearly teaches wine, but with the temperance movement going on, we don't want to be hypocrites. So his motive was to find an alternative to what the Bible said and what every church for the last 1,800 years had used. But prior to that, prior to Thomas Welch, every church in America used wine for the Lord's Supper. Many churches still do. In our area, there's only a very few of us that do, but you would be shocked at some of the churches that still use wine in the Lord's Supper. Can grape juice be what Jesus used? When Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper, he went straight from the Passover into the Lord's Supper. And I have talked to Jewish priests, I've talked to Jewish counselors, and I remember the first Jewish priest, I said, can you tell me, I actually went to where he worked, I said, can you tell me what did the Jews use in the Passover? He started laughing like I was some kind of a nut or something. Because anybody that has done any research at all knows that prior to Thomas Welch, every church, even today, the Jews still carry on that same tradition. Now, a couple of questions real quick. Let's move to 5-1 now. We're getting there. It's now 5-1. We don't need it for medicine anymore. Personally, I can't stand the taste of it. I don't even like grape juice because it tastes, I don't like the taste. We don't need wine for medicine. Because of social standards, let's just imagine, trying to think where we eat sometime that serves alcohol. Does Texas Roadhouse serve alcohol? Okay, we'll go to Texas Roadhouse, and somebody walks in, sees me drinking a Milwaukee Light. Is there such a thing? I don't know. I just made that up, but what would that do to my testimony as a pastor? So for testimony's sake, it's not what is right or wrong, but sometimes it's what will other people think. And while it may be looked down upon today, it has not been throughout history. Some of the greatest commentaries that I've got, prior to 1800, every one of them used wine. How many of you have heard me speak of Charles Spurgeon? I did not know this, and someone told me, so I went and looked it up years ago. Spurgeon was one of the greatest preachers in the 1800s. every night before bed, he would drink an 8-ounce glass of wine before he went to bed every single night. And nobody thought anything about it. Nobody looked down because it was not the use, it was the abuse. And so every night, Charles Spurgeon took about an 8-ounce glass and drank an 8-ounce glass of wine before he went to bed every night. We don't do that. Now we've got melatonin. If it gets really bad, I've still got some pain pills from a previous surgery. We don't need it today, but we need to be careful that we don't let our opinion tell us what the Bible says rather than the Bible tell us what it says. We don't change the Bible changes us. And like we were discussing, I just had a crazy thought. How many of you know what Karo sorghum molasses are? Karo sorghum. Love it. Growing up, we would take a piece of bread, soak it with Karo syrup, cut it up and eat it. I still do occasionally. But can you imagine if I took a gallon of Karo syrup and put it on a loaf of bread and ate that whole thing? I'd be sicker than a dog. Is there anything wrong with Karo syrup? Not to my knowledge. I certainly hope not. But if you eat a whole loaf of bread and a gallon of Karo syrup, you're probably going to be sick. You know, I can almost guarantee you're going to be sick. Can we? We can. Do I? No. Because of my testimony, the one exception, the only exception, is in taking the Lord's Supper. I want to take it exactly like Jesus did. And there's any historian can destroy the idea that Jesus used any kind of grape juice because it was 1800. I think it was finally patented in 1869 or something like that. So Thomas Welch was 1800 and something years too late to be what Jesus used in